Which is the jam. Good morning. I'd like to call the Kankakee County Board meeting of March 10th to order. Today's invocation is from Roger Hess.
Almighty and eternal God, we praise and thank you for calling us to serve your people. Give us your anointing, help us not to seek power nor position, but rather make us a vessel of your grace to touch the lives of your people and seek to be worthy of your love. Lord, use us as a channel of your compassion. Help us to be worthy of your trust so we may be an instrument of peace and hope to everyone. Give us the courage to be an agent of change and to achieve your dream of transformation. Father, I also ask that you watch over and protect all the emergency service personnel in our county, along with all the people serving in the military at home and abroad for protecting our nation. Finally, I ask you to heal our land and restore faith and righteousness in our nation. We ask this in your name. Amen.
Amen. Please join me in the pledge. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Alrighty. If I can get a roll call, please.
Mr. Washington, Mr. Hess,
Present.
Mr. Tholen, Mrs. Polk,
Present.
Mr. Snipes, Mr. Byrne,
Present.
Mr. Seroy,
Present.
Mr. Lear,
Present.
Mrs. Weber,
Present.
Mrs. Peters, Mr. Payton,
Present.
Mrs. Parker,
Present.
Ms. Dunbar, Mr. Kinzinger,
Present.
Mr. Fairfield,
Present.
Mr. Zenz, Ms. Haas, Mr. Carrico,
Present.
Mr. Eckhoff,
Present.
Mr. Smith, Mr. Swanson,
Present.
Ms. Zakulo,
Present.
Mr. Featherling,
Present.
Mr. Donnell, Mr. Miller,
Present.
Mr. Long,
Present.
Mr. Kirkstra,
Present.
Mr. Wheeler.
Present.
Quorum.
We have quorum. Under public commentary, I have one. It's for Reverend Doug Zimmerman from Kankakee.
Thank you. I appreciate this opportunity to speak. Transparency, a word most of us are familiar with, a word used at last month's county board meeting. Mr. Brandon Meredith spoke about transparency during the public comment time last month. He was speaking of his frustration with the FOIA request he made. He said, and I quote, "Private citizens deserve to have the information they request so they can look at it unfiltered, so they can draw their own conclusion. They don't get bits and pieces when they ask for things from a public official," end quote. Transparency comes from the word transparent. Definitions include free from pretense or deceit, readily understood, characterized by visibility or accessibility of information, especially concerning business practices. Examples of less than transparent in Kankakee County include the findings of the Office of the Attorney General of the State of Illinois in a letter dated February 1st, 2020, concerning a FOIA request made by the Schweikert Law Group that stated in part, "Therefore, it is the opinion of the Attorney General that Kankakee County has violated Section 3D of FOIA." Transparency. Members of Kankakee, Connect Kankakee, have filed FOIA requests with ICE and the Kankakee County Sheriff's Office concerning the offenses the ICE detainees have committed to warrant jail time and deportation, and the cost of housing, feeding, and medical expenses for people being housed at Jerome Combs Detention Center. No objective data on detainee population makeup has been provided. Sheriff Downey has said that breaking out the cost of those housed by ICE is too difficult. Transparency. Until recently, little information has been made public about the lobbyist who was hired and the hiring approved by this body has done for his $60,000 salary. Why are regular public reports not given about what he is doing for this county? I would know nothing about this lobbyist except for County Auditor Mr. Jake Lee's monthly report. Transparency. It is time that you, the elected officials of Kankakee County, become transparent in your actions. You are elected by, and more importantly, work for the people of Kankakee County. It is past time that transparency be the operative word of this board and all its committees. Thank you.
All right. That. So moving on, under certificates of appreciation, we're moving all of the Sheriff's Department acknowledgements until next month. But this one here is pretty special. Our coroner, Bob Gessner, long-serving public servant for 35 years with the county. I'd just like to personally thank Bob, and is both a dedicated public servant, somebody who takes his job very seriously, is constantly on the outside of some of the reasons why he may see so many, I'd say, of the population that visits his office on a basis. I won't say regular basis because you only go once, but he's out in the community with making sure that he sees the least amount of people, especially to overdoses and teen DUI and stuff like that. He exemplifies what we all strive to be. So I want to thank you, Bob, from a personal level and also from the county. And please join me up here. I have the finest piece of paper that money can buy that acknowledge that.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, County Board members, and the citizens of Kankakee County for electing me in the position. I look out in the audience there, and I wonder how many have been here for 35 years. I know you, George. But I appreciate it, and thanks for the kind words, Chairman, on that aspect there. I am running again, so I will be there, hopefully there for another 4 years and continually fight this problem that we have in the county. So thank you very much, and may God bless all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on, also I have the public defender, Ed Pentuick, is 25 years with the county. Ed's not here today. He's defending somebody publicly. So we just want to say thanks to Ed. He's with the state's attorney's office, and now he's over at the PD's office, and we appreciate all you've done for us. So moving on. It's over here, so I don't forget it. So the minutes of the last meeting, February 11th, 2020, is there a motion to approve? Mr. Burns, second, Mrs. Parker. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Under Claims Committee report, let me first get a motion to approve the claims. Let's go. Mr. Fairfield, second. Is there anybody else? Sorry. Mr. Long. We'll wait on the voice vote, please. You have to read those in the record.
Mr. Chairman and members of the County Board, your Committee on County Claims would beg leave to report they've examined the following claims presented and recommend payment. The clerk is hereby authorized and directed to issue orders to the several claimants payable out of the funds as follows. Highway Fund, $901,789.08. All other funds, $1,268,258.23. Total for the month of January 2020, $2,170,047.31. The General Fund, $714,877.81. All other funds, $5,159,167.98 for total for the month of January 2020, $5,874,045.79.
Alrighty. We have a motion and a second. Any questions on those? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign.
Roll call.
Oh, roll call. Yeah, it says, sorry, I just read the cliff notes. Roll call, please.
Mr. Washington,
Present. Aye.
Mr. Hess,
Aye.
Mrs. Polk, Mr. Snipes,
Aye.
Mr. Byrne,
Aye.
Mr. Seroy,
Aye.
Mr. Lear, Mrs. Weber,
Aye.
Mr. Payton,
Aye.
Mrs. Parker,
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger,
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield,
Aye.
Mr. Carrico,
Aye.
Mr. Eckhoff,
Aye.
Mr. Swanson,
Aye.
Ms. Zakulo,
Aye.
Mr. Featherling,
Aye.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Long,
Aye.
Mr. Kirkstra,
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler.
Aye. Motion carries. It's like we got 2 Mondays this week, I think, so I apologize for that. Under department reports,
The County Collector's Monthly Report for January 2020. Total cash and bank and investments, $1,091,797.65. Treasurer's Monthly Report for January 2020. Total cash and investments, $1,091,797.65. Recorder's Monthly Report for January 2020. Disbursement fees paid to the county treasurer, $118,130.17. County Clerk's Monthly Report for January 2020. Total of $51,350.68. Animal Control Monthly Report for January 2020. Total fees, $57,082.25. The IPTIP Building Fund, $376.14. Total animals handled, 135. The Monthly Building Division Report for January 2020. 28 total permits, fees of $8,129. Total extra fees of $2,607 for a total of $10,736. Monthly resolution list for March 2020, total of the county, $36,238.05.
already as noted, there is no circuit clerk's monthly report to approve, so is there a motion to accept? Mr. Eckhoff, second. There, Ms. Polk. It's a voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Under consent agenda, take a moment, read through it. Is there anything that anybody would like removed from the consent agenda and considered separately? Mr. Kinzinger? KDC?
Yes.
Okay. Number 26. All right. Let's see here. Any others? Final time? Alrighty, that'll be a motion to combine and approve the consent agenda. Is in order. Mr. Swanson, second. Mr. Payton, if we could read those on the record, sir.
The appointment of Catherine Langlois to the Kankakee County Historic Preservation Commission. The appointment of William Sawyer to the Kankakee County Zoning Board of Appeals. Declaration and disposal of surplus and unwanted vehicle for the Kankakee County Sheriff's Department / maintenance. Kankakee County Zoning Map Amendment 2020. Resolution authorizing the County Board Chairman to sign a jurisdictional transfer agreement for East 12,000 North Road, County Highway 1 to Will County by Kankakee County under the Illinois Highway Code. Resolution authorizing the County Board Chairman to sign a jurisdictional transfer agreement for the transfer of part of County Line Road, County Highway 16, from the County of Will to the County of Kankakee under the Illinois Highway Code. Authorization for the County Board Chairman to issue a letter in support of the South Suburban Airport.
Alrighty. So that will take a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Hess.
Aye.
Mrs. Polk. Mr. Snipes.
Aye.
Mr. Byrne.
Aye.
Mr. Seroy.
Aye.
Mr. Lear.
Aye.
Mrs. Weber.
Aye.
Mr. Payton.
Aye.
Mrs. Parker.
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger.
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield.
Aye.
Mr. Carrico.
Aye.
Mr. Eckhoff.
Aye.
Mr. Swanson.
Aye.
Ms. Zakulo.
Aye.
Mr. Featherling. Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Long.
Aye.
Mr. Kirkstra.
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler.
Aye. Motion carries. And then number 26, if we could get the title read in just real quick. Uh-oh.
Resolution of the County Board of Kankakee County, Illinois, authorizing the County Board Chairman to sign an agreement for the Kankakee Development Corporation, KDC, and the County of Kankakee for a county mural.
To get into discussion first, is there a motion to approve? Let's go with Mr. Snipes, second Mr. Washington. Mr. Kinzinger, did you have some suggestions? Okay, just a moment, please. I apologize. All right, go ahead.
I am in favor of this resolution, but there's a couple standards that I think we need to address. One of them is a performance standard for KDC. In other words, once work begins, when is it going to be completed? We don't want a half mural up there. Secondly, I would like to see the county board chairman approve the final design, which will not be unreasonably withheld. We do have a county business here, and we have to look at that aspect of it. And finally, as much as important as it, more important than anything is I think the county board at any time can withdraw from the agreement by, compensating KDC for reasonable out-of-pocket expense. I don't like to see this board bind future for 5 years or longer unnecessarily. I think there needs to be an opt-out clause in case something changes.
Sure, and is that in the form of a motion to amend with those
Yes,
three recommendations? So we'll read that back real quick. I just want to, we're now as a motion to amend, and we'll read that back. The performance standard, once the work begins, when it is complete, as long as you're allowing me to say, is that a month or 2 weeks or whatever, as you're giving me that latitude based on their timeline. Because it may be paint the wall one couple of weeks and then next week it'll be to go over it. So I want to make sure we're clear there. It says county board chairman must approve the final design, which will not be unreasonably withheld. And then the third amendment is county board at any time can withdraw from the agreement by compensating KDC for reasonable out-of-pocket expense. So basically paint over the wall, you know, or whatever happens at that point. So those are the motions. Is there a second to those additions? Is that a second, Mr.? Okay, Featherling? Is there any discussion on the motion to amend to include these stipulations in the contract? Okay, so I'll do a voice vote just on the amendment at this point. All those in favor of the amendment, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. The motion carries. Thank you for that. All very reasonable. So now we go back to the original matter at hand. Is there a motion on, what, do we have the original motion? Yes. We do have one on the book. So any discussion on overall what this is? Alrighty, ready for voice vote? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We'll make sure we get that spelled out. Thank you. Alrighty, under finance, the first item, can we get the title read in the record, please?
Resolution of the County Board of Kankakee County, Illinois, regarding authorizing the county board chairman to sign an extension of agreement with Alfred G. Ronan Limited.
Alrighty. First step is is there a motion, Mr. Lear, to approve? Second, Mr. Eckloff. Discussion on that. Yeah, I hope everybody watched the presentation from Mr. Ronan. That's one of the reasons we are transparent and broadcast all meetings, not just for board members, but for the public. So no discussion, no comments? Mr. Byrne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I, for one, for my district, some of the projects that Mr. Ronan's worked on has had a positive impact on my district, which encompasses CSL Bearing and a lot of the work that isn't coming in the capital project. So having someone at the table to work on behalf of the county has paid off, in my opinion. At least I can say for my district.
Any other thoughts, comments? Roll call. Yes, Mr. Siroy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and just to piggyback off of Mr. Byrne, we are looking forward for Mr. Ronan's group to help us with the pipeline on the east side of the county for gas out in the Hopkins Park, Pembroke area, so his help will be needed in that project also.
Alrighty, Mr. Snipes.
Just for the purpose of clarity, can we just have a cost benefit analysis to show basically how he basically benefits us for whatever we spend in that arena, just to quiet anything that's that may be considered
I can actually do it right now.
That's good.
$8.5 million in a capital bill for a project that wasn't even on the map 8 months before we brought him in. I think that we got our money's worth. The residents at the busiest intersection we already have in the county that we've known as a problem that has been unable to be addressed because it wasn't on District 3's map. So we're going to be putting people to work. We're going to be fixing a long-standing problem. Traffic lights at the current, well, not the current exit of that area, which by putting pressure on and working with the Department of Transportation, they committed to paying for the stoplights, which they never do, and the widening and everything over there. That's what it takes. It takes your legislators. It takes on both the Senate and the House side, and then also working with the lobbyists, because obviously there's a lot of Chicago influence in the way the money gets distributed, especially on these types of projects. So thank you for that. The cost benefit was way, way in our favor at this point.
0.7% of the money we've invested to get that project done alone.
0.7?
0.7. Less than 1%.
Right. So, any other comments, questions on that? Mr. Lear?
The person who travels Armour Road frequently, I'm going to speak on behalf of anybody on Armour Road. I was involved in a fender bender rear end accident on Armour because of the problems with the traffic there. I'll be glad to see that the risk of that is reduced greatly.
Yeah, I think we all will. And then obviously the permit to open up the new entrance, that was something that we couldn't get moving before he helped us out tremendously. And we got the governor here. We're getting ready there with their help to get another visit to remind of their commitment for when this project starts in about a year. It's in final engineering, and it wasn't even in that phase considered before we had a lobbyist. So, and now we're working on Hopkins Park. That's the next phase, and we'll talk about that in the executive committee. We've already outlined what we've been working on. We've already been working on the pipeline for over a year, getting in people's ear down in Springfield. That's one of the benefits as well. Now we have our legislators stepping up and doing actual legislation to help Hopkins. This all works together. It's just what the system that we're in right now. So, any other questions, comments? Yes, Mr. Fairfield.
I foresee we're probably gonna need him eventually as far as the new airport.
Yeah, and there's, I don't know if he's working with other areas or municipalities on that project as well. I know he has been worked with locals, but yeah, for sure.
Well, that's gonna affect our area, so
Yeah,
there'll be some things that happen.
yeah. We definitely want to make sure that doesn't roll over the top of us, that whatever happens there is with what exactly we need it to happen. Local road infrastructure, because just like we know now, these trucks are using every road that they can find in the county to miss the Borman. They're cutting through everywhere. So what happens when that becomes an airport? I say when, I think it's more likely that it's going to be an airport than it ever really was. So thank you for that. Mr. Washington.
Is the airport still referred to as regional?
I don't know if they're referring it to anything anymore as far as just the third airport. It's back to that.
I think it's important to find out,
Yeah.
because regional would include us and would give us a voice on the board of directors, so on and so forth.
We still have that. There is still a legislated, got a brain cramping on it, board, if you will. There's a legislative board which we have many representatives on. It's us and Will County basically that are on there, and that's still in effect. I'm not saying it's going to always be that way, because this was done 20 years ago when that was created, that board, but it's still there. And I've had conversations with Will County about where it's probably time to take a look at reactivating that when this gets some legs.
The reason I bring it up is there was strong resentment for Kankakee County being included when I was going to, with the original group that were doing the studies and so on and so forth. So I don't know where that sentiment is right now. So it'd be good for us to find out if that connection is still there.
Yeah, it is still there, but everything's kind of dormant, because with 90% of the land being acquired, that's one thing. But then also the actual funding to build the first few set of terminals is where we're going now. They've funded an interchange to go to it. Now, I don't know if they've figured out where the money for that's going to come from yet, but that doesn't seem to matter in Illinois, does it? So that's a heck of a construction project. There'll be a lot of people that work here, because of that. So I think that's a good thing. But then again, we don't want to make sure that it's not rolling over the top of us. So that's why we have to engage lobbyists to make sure we have that seat at that table down there. We'll have one here locally, for sure. Any other questions, Mr. Payton?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to ditto the gas line. It's been a rumor for maybe 30 or 40 years that Pembroke would have a gas line. This time, because I've been in the meetings, I really believe it's going to happen.
As do I, as do I. And we're looking under every rock for local matching money, and we're finding some rocks. So there's something under the rock, should I say. Yeah, there's plenty of rocks. Believe me, they get thrown at us quite a bit. All right. So any other discussion on that matter? Now, this is just until the end of this year, because this board can't make a decision for future boards. We will, obviously, those that are fortunate to still be here in the next board, will make another decision over the next 2-year legislative session, because usually that's the best way to engage, is on a 2-year legislative cycle, because you don't do everything the first year. It's building and building and building. So this is just till the end of this year. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Hess.
Aye.
Mrs. Polk. Mr. Snipes.
Aye.
Mr. Byrne.
Aye.
Mr. Seroy.
Aye.
Mr. Lear.
Aye.
Mrs. Weber.
Aye.
Mr. Payton.
Aye.
Mrs. Parker.
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger. Mr. Fairfield.
Aye.
Mr. Kirko.
Aye.
Mr. Eckhoff.
Aye.
Mr. Swanson.
Aye.
Ms. Zakulo.
Aye.
Mr. Featherling.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Long.
Aye.
Mr. Kirkstra.
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler.
Aye. Motion carries. Alrighty, and the second item, please, we can get that right into the record.
Resolution of the County Board of Kankakee County, Illinois regarding general interfund borrowing accounts as of November 30th, 2019.
Oh, I got that, Jim. I saw it. Yeah. What was that again? No, I'm just kidding. So this is basically our cleanup for our interfund borrowing. I believe, is that somebody lurking around the door over there, in case somebody has some questions? Steve is here if anybody has any questions about this, but I need a motion first to get on the floor. Mr. Hess, a second by Mr. Kulo. Do you have any comments, Steve, or does, I mean, this is just our cleanup before the audit, basically, of last year's interfund borrowing? We have to document that, so. Is there any comments about that? Does anybody see any change in the numbers? For the positive, as I do. Substantially. Alrighty, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Hess.
Aye.
Mrs. Polk.
Aye.
Mr. Snipes. Mr. Byrne.
Aye.
Mr. Seroy.
Aye.
Mr. Lear.
Aye.
Mrs. Weber.
Aye.
Mr. Payton.
Aye.
Mrs. Parker.
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger. Mr. Fairfield.
Aye.
Mr. Kirko.
Aye.
Mr. Eckhoff.
Aye.
Mr. Swanson.
Aye.
Ms. Zakulo. Mr. Featherling.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Long.
Aye.
Mr. Kirkstra.
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler.
Aye, motion carries. Does anyone remember when that number was like 6 million? And that was 3 years ago. We got a lot done. Thank you for that. Moving on to the next item. If we could read that in the record, and then I have some clarification to make before we move forward.
Resolution of the County Board of Kankakee County, Illinois regarding second amended purchase of county vehicles and related equipment by the Sheriff's Department.
Wanted to note in the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, whereas the number of parentheses is correct, $828,893.02. It was a previous number was left in there, so we wanted to note that the text. Oh, you got it out there. Okay. All right. Just want to point that out. Okay. In your packet was different. So you guys are aware of that. You got the corrected copy. But beyond that, it's and let's get a motion first. Mr. Hess, is that a motion too?
I would make a motion, but I also want to make a comment.
Let me get a second. I'll come right back to you. A second, Mr. Byrne. Okay, go ahead.
This also includes, I believe, the pickup truck and plow for the maintenance department.
Correct. Yeah.
As long as all the board members understand, it's just not the sheriff's office.
Right. Yeah, this is not all of those vehicles for the Sheriff's Department. It includes those two, which are already received.
Right.
And I want to mention that. That's why we're where we're at, because we've got to get those paid for. This is the one where we went to order the pickups, and then they weren't available anymore. So we had to kind of backtrack and, okay, well, we're not going to do this. We're going to do that. So we haven't actually ordered those other vehicles yet, but this authorizes the not to exceed at $850. because the sheriff has to get back from vacation, and then we're going to place that order. It's his, and Ken, you could give me the head nod or speak on it, but it's apparently it's going to be even less than that. I think that the sheriff was saying that it's not even going to be that the number we have in front of us. So the bank, the reason this is also a purchase instead of a lease is because over the past 8 years, I believe, we weren't credit worthy from banks. And so we had to do leases instead of purchases, and now we're back. Local banks will work with us on purchases. So, and these are state bid prices, all that kind of stuff. So I want to make sure the board knew that that's why there's a little bit of a difference here. But for the most part, it is the same resolution we've already passed. So we have a motion and a second. More discussion? Thoughts on that? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Hess.
Aye.
Mrs. Polk.
Aye.
Mr. Snipes.
Aye.
Mr. Byrne.
Aye.
Mr. Seroy.
Aye.
Mr. Lear.
Aye.
Mrs. Weber.
Aye.
Mr. Payton.
Aye.
Mrs. Parker.
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger.
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield.
Aye.
Mr. Carrico.
Aye.
Mr. Eckhoff.
Aye.
Mr. Swanson.
Aye.
Ms. Zakulo.
Aye.
Mr. Featherling.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Long.
Aye.
Mr. Kirkstra.
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler.
Aye. Motion carries. Other business, one opening on the Mantino number 9 Drainage District, 3 openings on the Regional Planning Commission, 1 opening on the Kankakee County GIS Committee, County Board Member, 3 openings on the Bloom Grove Cemetery Association. I think those reapplications just showed up. 2 openings on the Kankakee County Farmland Assessment Review Committee. Alrighty, so any old business before we go into executive session? Anything old, worthy of business? All right, well then under new business, I need a motion to go into executive session for pending litigation, 5 ILCS 120/2, C11. Need a motion on that. Mr. Fairfield, second Mr. Payton, and that is a roll call vote to go in.
Mr. Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Hess.
Aye.
Mrs. Polk.
Aye.
Mr. Snipes.
Aye.
Mr. Byrne.
Aye.
Mr. Seroy.
Aye.
Mr. Lear.
Aye.
Mrs. Weber.
Aye.
Mr. Payton.
Aye.
Mrs. Parker.
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger. Mr. Fairfield.
Aye.
Mr. Kirko.
Aye.
Mr. Eckhoff.
Aye.
Mr. Swanson.
Aye.
Ms. Zakulo.
Aye.
Mr. Featherling.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Long.
Aye.
Mr. Kirkstra.
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler.
Aye. Motion carries. Be just a moment, please, when you get things switched over. Alrighty, we are now back from executive session. We have a matter to clear up. It has to do with a settlement regarding the settlement in Parts v. Kankakee County Sheriff's Office, case number 19-CH-101. This is a settlement regarding a FOIA that went into the Sheriff's Department, who is the FOIA officer, and the link was not functioning at the time, so the FOIA did not go through. And in subsequent attempts to get the FOIA responded to, it fell outside of the time frame. So instead of the litigant going to the
Public access.
the PAC, the Public Access Counselor at the Attorney General, they went right to a lawsuit. So this had to do with a situation, let's just say, that was unfortunate, but we didn't respond to the FOIA in time for whatever reason, and they filed suit. And as part of the negotiation, it was agreed upon that they wanted damages. Started at one end, we started at another end, and we met at an area in the middle. So it was recommended by outside counsel that we settle for $6,000 in this matter. And even though it is distasteful, that is before the board to settle this amount rather than incur future costs on something that is obviously we are in the wrong. We didn't respond in time for whatever reason. So that's the recommendation that we're looking for, is to settle this for the $6,000 and not incur any more cost, which there would be more cost on fighting this. So the recommendation, is there one on the floor? Mr. Snipes?
We settle.
Mr. Snipes makes the motion to settle. Is there a second? Second, Mr. Payton. Any discussion on this matter? It's a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Washington,
Aye.
Mr. Hess,
Aye.
Mrs. Polk, Mr. Snipes, Mr. Byrne,
Aye.
Mr. Seroy,
Aye.
Mr. Lear,
Aye.
Mrs. Weber,
Aye.
Mr. Payton,
Aye.
Mrs. Parker,
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger, Mr. Fairfield,
Aye.
Mr. Carrico,
Aye.
Mr. Eckhoff, Mr. Swanson, Ms. Zakulo,
Aye. Sorry.
Mr. Featherling,
Aye.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Long, Mr. Kirkstra,
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler.
Aye. Motion carries. I guess, is there any more old business? We already asked that once before we say goodbye. Motion to adjourn. Mr. Hess, second. Ms. Polk, I saw it. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Have a good day.